Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. We have a really great guest on today. Since 2007, she's led the program management and UX initiatives for clients including M+, the Met, Kickstarter, Wacom, Zumtobel, USA Today, EA, Spotify, and Google. Her work has been recognized by Cannes, the Webbys, the Emmys, the Interaction Design Association, the European Design Awards, and many more. Please join me in welcoming Irene Pereyra. Welcome.
Thanks, Thomas. Nice to be here.
You ready for 20 questions?
Yes, let's do it.
Great. Question one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
So I'm a UX designer by trade. I'm also the co-founder of the design studio Anton and Irene. And besides that, I'm also very active in academia. So I head up the interaction design department and Harbor Space, which is located both in Barcelona and Bangkok, as well as I'm the director of the Masters for Digital Experimentation, which is part of Elisava in Barcelona as well.
Awesome. Just to know for our audience, Irene is joining us from Bangkok today, and I'm recording on my side in Vancouver, Canada. So super awesome to be able to connect like this. So question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
I was wondering about that question, Thomas, because it's an interesting question. You could answer that in so many different ways. I think for me, and this might sound a bit esoteric, but I'm very good at reading between the lines and kind of hearing the subtext of what someone is saying. And I think as a UX designer, that's a little bit of a superpower to have that, because it's, not only being able to understand what it is that people are saying they want or need, but actually kind of getting to the core of what might be underneath that, or unearth things that are deeper than that. And since a lot of the work we do obviously is for clients, it's also really important to be able to hear what people aren't saying when you're talking to clients, to understand what maybe some of the underlying motivations are. And yeah, so I think that is kind of it's not really knowledge, but it's maybe more of a thing I know how to do is to read between the lines.
Great. So question three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
I think because I'm inherently a curious person, and I also really care, and I'm interested in people. And I think UX is a great marriage of those things, and design in general is a great marriage of those things. Because from my perspective, design, it's not really just about creating beautiful things, but it's really more about understanding the human experience, and then connecting the dots, even across cultures, and then telling a story that resonates, or create an experience that feels impactful. So yeah, it's like the great marriage of curiosity and about things, but also about people.
Great. And I think all of us, most of us struggle with number four, but the question is, what does your future look like?
Um, I'm not sure. I'm not like a long-term planner. I kind of like to be surprised by what the future might bring. If you would have told me 5 years ago, for example, that I would be living in between Barcelona and Bangkok after living in New York for 20 years, I would not even have been able to imagine that.
Mm.
So I think there's something quite nice about not having a plan and just letting things unfold, and constantly allowing yourself to be surprised by what's coming.
Great. And five, we say, is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a child of two cultures. My dad is Peruvian. My mom is Dutch, and I was born in Peru but raised in Amsterdam. And then I lived in the US for 20 years. Now I live between Barcelona and Bangkok. So I think places, it can be stifling in a way. Like, I think if you're always in the same place your entire life, it's probably not a good thing. I think that's where a lot of the negative things in the world come from, like nationalism and xenophobia. So being feeling like you belong to multiple places, I think is better, or it's good. And you don't have to live places to do that. You can also take, travel or read about other cultures or other places. I think if I think about it as a designer, Peruvian culture has a very strong and rich indigenous culture, and also design elements that come with that. So the vibrant colors, the geometric patterns, but also the inspiration found through nature. And
Mm.
then if you think about Dutch design, it's kind of the complete opposite of that. It's like hyper modernist, rational, stripping things down to its basics, the straightest line from point A to point B. And so I think there's a tension maybe even within me in those two places, because I love the kind of magical realism that exists in Latin America, but then I also feel very strongly affected by the efficiency of Dutch design. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's every place I think has something to teach you if you are willing to take it in. And yeah, I think that any kind of openness to the world's diversity is makes you a better designer, because it makes you a more compassionate human being, and that's ultimately what creates a better designer as well.
Perfect. I love that. So number six, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Maybe I would say maybe it's like to maybe embrace your unique interests. Like we all have kind of things that really drive us, or we're interested in or passionate about, and they might be very far outside of the traditional design world. So maybe you're, I don't know, super interested in photography or world economics or whatever it is. And I think that's a good place to start to to do more work in that area. And if people aren't willing to pay you to do work in that area, then just do it for yourself. And luckily, I have done that quite a bit in my career. But I think when I was younger, I was very much chasing the success of working on big brands that have big impact. And it wasn't until I was a bit older that I realized that I'm actually happiest when I get to do design that is about projects that really fuel my own interest. And so with our studio with Anton, we deliberately set out to carve out some time for both of us to be able to explore our own interests more deeply.
Great. So seven, what's a day in your life like?
That's an impossible question to answer, because every day is so different. Depends on where I am in the world, depends on whether I'm teaching or in the middle of a client project, or if I'm on site with a client or at a design conference or working on a personal project. Um, yeah, there's really no 2 days that are alike. And it's kind of my favorite thing about the job. I'm not the type of person that is super tied to a desk. I get very restless anyway, so extreme routine for me is not great. And luckily, if you're a designer, if you want, you don't have to, but you can design your life in a certain way that you don't have to have a very strong routine.
Great. And lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Yeah, so I read a lot, but I never read design books. So I don't know if that's a question specific to design, but I find design books extremely boring and
Mhm.
superficial, and yeah, they just I'd rather not read them. So I have many different very wide interests that extend far beyond design, and that's really where I devote most of my energy learning. So things like, I don't know, like I love popular science, philosophy, world politics, history, macroeconomics, art, architecture, music, fashion. Like those are the things that I want to learn more about, and that I am learning more about, that I spend my energy on. And in general, though, I do feel that if you are more well-rounded as a person in topics outside of design, it will affect you as a designer in a positive way. Because if you only read design books and you think that's sort of where the knowledge lies, I think you get very myopic, and it's a very kind of self-referential, insular, not typically not very academic, not very intellectual environment. So it's probably not good if that's all you're doing to be a better designer. It's like you should get out of design to be a better designer.
Great. And tools. What tools do you use, digital and analog?
Yeah, I don't I mean tools, I guess you mean software as well. Like I use the basic stuff. So like I have a laptop, I use Keynote, I use Figma. I'm not very married to any of those things. I've been around for a long time, so I've seen those things change like every 2 or 3 years anyway. So um yeah, that stuff, my students are always very obsessed with that. Like right now everyone wants to do everything in Figma, and I'm always like, don't get too attached to Figma because it's probably not going to be the standard for ever, because nothing ever is.
Mhm.
So I think tools are kind of irrelevant. I have a friend, one of my best friends is a very well-known illustrator. Her name is Yuko Shimizu. She's a Japanese illustrator, and she always laughs because people always ask her like, "Oh, what kind of pen do you use, or what kind of brush do you use?" As if that's the thing that makes her a good illustrator.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't care. I sketch, I use whatever is the industry standard, and it's all that stuff is pretty much the same ultimately. So pretty easy to learn once you know one of them. And if the industry moves again, I will say this, the one thing I hate about Figma right now is that this whole idea of like the collaborative artboard where you see a million arrows in your working files is absolutely horrendous. So whoever came up with that needs to be stripped of their um, software design diploma, because it's horrible. So there's a lot of things actually that I find more annoying than beneficial whenever there's a new software out that everybody jumps on as the greatest, latest, best thing.
Great. Okay. Halfway, number 10, work-life balance. How do you deal with it?
Pretty good now. I used to be a very extreme workaholic, working many, many hours every day, working weekends, having basically no private life. Um, and I thought that was fun at the time. I was in my 20s. Maybe it was fun. It's in your 20s, you have more energy for that stuff. Now I don't work more than 8 hours a day, if that. Sometimes I only work 6 hours a day. But also, it depends on what you consider work. Because if I teach, I enjoy that very much, and of course, that's a couple of hours out of my day. But it's a different way to work than sitting behind a computer and designing. Um, I also do yoga every single day. I bike every single day. I just make sure that I don't work on the weekends. I don't answer emails after working hours. It's basic stuff that I think I kind of didn't do in my 20s, and now I'm very much stricter, and also at the same time much more relaxed with how much I work.
Great. 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
I would love to either be a writer or a researcher.
Hmm. What would you not like to do with your career?
Anything that would require me to not be my own boss. So if I would have a boss, whatever that job is, I would not like it.
Do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Yes. The quote is by William Bruce Cameron, who wrote this book called Informal Sociology. It was published in 1963. And the quote is, "Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted." And this is especially relevant for any kind of research we do in UX, thinking about, yeah, we're so obsessed with stats and numbers right now that we kind of forget that being human and the human experience is actually quite messy and it's not always measurable.
Great. And how about a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Anything that comes out of Silicon Valley, all those cliches like move fast and break things, or think outside the box, or these kind of, yeah, like account guy cliches that come out of Silicon Valley are just, I find it just like nails on a chalkboard for me.
Nice. And you have one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
Curious.
What keeps you up at night?
Nothing. I sleep very well. I've never been an insomniac.
Do you have a dream you're chasing?
I don't know if I'm chasing it. I think I'm living it. I like to live an interesting life, and I think I'm doing pretty good so far.
Great. Last few here. What inspires you?
I think ultimately humanity, us, the human experience, who we are, the people we share, the lives we lead, the challenges we face. Yeah, I'm deeply interested in us as people and cultures, and also in finding the universal and the specific that connects all of us. Yeah, I think ultimately I would like to contribute to making the world a more empathetic place, and I do that through the lens of design. But that's what inspires us, the human experience.
Great. And any advice you'd like to share?
This is something that it's a Dutch saying that I'm going to translate in English, and my mom always used to say to me as a child, and I think it's a great thing to say to anyone. And it literally translates to you already have a no, but you might get a yes.
Mm,
And what that means basically is a lot of the times we're afraid to ask for things, whether it's asking for a favor or asking for a promotion or asking for example, someone to join their podcast, right? And we just assume that people are going to say no to us or that they're not going to want to do it. And this saying, what I like about it is that it's saying basically the no is already implied because you already have that no. So there's
mm.
no harm in asking because the no is a guarantee, but the yes might still come. And I think that's a nice way to go through life.
Great. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? What's our call to action?
Keep tabs on me. I am not that present, I guess. I guess you mean social media. I don't know. Like I don't I have a website with my colleague Anton called Anton and Irene. It's antonandirene.com. That's where all our work is.
Mm.
And then I have an Instagram, but I don't really post about work. It's just me traveling. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting though that we feel this need to memorialize everything constantly.
Mm.
I don't know if that's such a healthy thing to do. I don't I'd rather have the memories myself, for me and not necessarily have everything be sort of in this visual journal for everyone to constantly get to peek into. Maybe a little bit of a private person in that sense also.
Great. Sounds great. Well, thanks so much for joining, waking up early in Bangkok there. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks, Thomas.